show with Nancy Fleming, who is the host of the Money and Motivation Show, and a special guest. In fact, the reason why we're doing this special show is Kirk Adams. Kirk, are you with us? Kirk, are you with us? All righty.
Kirk? You there? Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. I'm not sure you can hear me okay, but we'll work on that sound while we're going. Are you able to hear me okay, Kirk?
I can hear you now.
Okay, well, again, welcome all my listeners to this special edition. We set this up actually last week. I believe, wasn't it last week, Kirk, when we had set this up as a special edition?
And, yeah, that's exactly right.
And that was immediately
conversation, and the phone line got cut.
Yeah, and it was right outside here. We had SRP workers trying to fix some storm issues from the storms we'd had a few days earlier, and the whole station was cut off, and so we were without radio for a while. But welcome, hey, and this is going to be quite the hour. So I hope you're ready, Kirk. I got lots of questions for you.
I have a couple myself. Yes.
And, this is Nancy. I know you've met me, Kirk, but you haven't met Nancy Fleming, but she asked if she could join us as well.
I did. I actually signed the petition for you.
Oh,
so
well,
I thought it'd be fun.
Much.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to ask you a few questions, too. Mark has a bunch, and I had a little bit different angle on a couple of thoughts that are concerned to myself and my clients.
I've got to tell you, though, Kirk, she's still undecided, so you got some talking to do.
Well,
my neighborhood
I
has
talking to undecided
yeah,
voters.
Yeah, Kirk, my neighbor has both signs up, so it just depends on who I talk to, which is kind of nice. Nobody's out there saying the lesser of two evils. That's a good thing.
Hey, Kirk,
yes.
Because it's been a while since you've been on my show, and the last time you were on my show, you were involved only in the state legislature, and now you're, of course, running for the United States Congress. Would it be okay if we just start out, and I wanted to just, again, discuss with you a few minutes some of those things that we talked about in the first show about why did you decide to get into politics in the very first place, and tell us a little bit about your entering into politics.
Well, that's a fantastic question. I was inspired by two things, really, that got me to get involved in politics. The first was a small business owner. And unfortunately, in today's world, no matter how large or small your business is, you're going to have interaction with government. And usually it's not going to be a positive interaction.
Amen.
That was the case with me. And I got involved as a volunteer small business advocate. So I'd go down to the state capitol and I would testify on a bill for or against and give the small business man's perspective on it. And I discovered in that process that there were not enough people in politics who signed the front of the paycheck, not just the back of the paycheck, and understood the difficulties that government regulation and excessive taxation brought. And then I was also inspired, frankly, by the biography of John Adams written by David McCullough. I was so inspired by it that I named my fifth child, my son, after President John Adams. What is inspiring to me about John and Abigail Adams was their focus on future generations. They were more focused on what the next generation would think of their efforts to preserve, promote freedom and liberty than they were their own prosperity. One of my favorite John Adams quotes is, "I study war and politics so my children can study math and science, and so their children can study art and poetry." That is how I got to the point where I ran for office for the first time in 2006. On a small business platform, I won, and then I was elected by my colleagues as Speaker of the House in 2000.
The name that you chose for your child, I hope, was John and not Adams.
It was John.
Well, that would have been, you never know, Now, the experiences you had in the state legislature, we'll talk about those a little bit as well in a moment. But first, running these races. So you ran that first race in 2006, you've run others, and now you're running a federal race. Tell us a little bit about the different experience between running a state legislature race and a United States Congress race.
Well, the single biggest difference is when you're running a state legislative race, you don't have to deal with the Washington establishment. They're not very interested in the state legislature. But when you're running for Congress, it's almost as if you're running in a second primary. There is a Washington primary, and that primary is really about the dollars. And what I have learned in this race is that Washington does not like outsiders. They don't like people they know. They don't like people they're not familiar with. And that produces money disadvantage, no doubt for someone like me who doesn't have the 18 years in Washington like my opponent has. But the good thing is the Washington power brokers don't actually get to vote in this primary. And we feel good about where we're at. We're working hard, and hopefully the people who actually vote will accept our message and send me to Washington.
So in this Washington-type primary, it's not a personality issue. It's more who they're more comfortable, who's already been there. And so they're just supporting the person that they know. Is that more what you're thinking?
It's more about who they have relationships with and therefore who they have influence over. And I think this is actually one of the defining characteristics in this race. If you believe that we need more people with state leadership and private sector experience like I have in the small business world, then I'm your candidate. If you believe that the missing ingredient to solve the country's problems is more Washington experience, then the other guy is your candidate. Now, and that, I think, presents a clear choice to the voters, and voters deserve to have those kinds of choices.
Now, I certainly recognize the great power of influence that Washington has, but 2 years ago we witnessed the influence that local grassroots can have when the Tea Party was able to put so many new representatives in the House.
Very key moment, I think, in our history. And I think when we look back 30, 40 years from now, we will identify 2010 as a turning point. It was one of the largest freshman classes elected in United States history. It was also the youngest, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
I think going forward, I think we will identify 2010 as the beginning of a generational change in leadership in Washington. And I don't think it can come soon enough.
Well, I wanted to get back to your comment that you said about the background of the business owner. Just in a general statement without, because we'll ask you some specific questions on policy, but just generally speaking with that small business owner background, where do you find the economic policies today from the viewpoint of small business owners and the self-employed people?
Well, I would say that the economic policies of today, particularly over the last 3.5 years, have tilted towards the politically advantaged and large corporations. And here's what I mean by that. If you're politically advantaged and you have the right connections in the administration, or you have the ability to hire a team of lobbyists to get your little special interest carved out of the tax code or your appropriation to your business or your industry, then you can do quite well. This is why a company like Cylinder was able to spend $2 million on lobbying and get a $530-some-odd million government loan. And there are multiple instances, some of a smaller scale, of these types of favored industries and favored companies getting preferential treatment.
And doesn't it
The second thing is that, and this is a really important point I want to make, the second thing is that when you look at this flood of new regulations that have been coming out of Washington, D.C. in the last 3 years, those regulations hurt small employers the worst. Because a small employer does not have the legal team and the resources to deal with the federal agencies and to find the loopholes and to ask for the exceptions and so forth. A small employer, if they can't comply and they get shut down or they get penalized, they're just left out in the cold. And so it seems to me that the economic policies coming from Washington, D.C., whether they are intentional or not, are driving a stake to the hearts of many small businesses.
On the other, what I want to say on the other side too is, in addition to the favoritism and the policies actually sometimes being punitive to the small business owner, I have a real concern about the number of lawsuits the federal government has been filing. Just recently, of course, we have the large one in Ohio. Of course, we had our own Arizona lawsuit. And I guess with the Olympics there, it makes a good contrast. What would happen to our Olympic team if they had the same type of attitude? We're supposed to be on the same team. So if you have the federal government suing in Arizona or Ohio, we've got state resources that are being spent on attorneys, and again, taxpayer dollars being spent on what? On what? I mean, and I have a real concern for this because the budgets on the states are already so tight.
Hey, Kirk Adams, are you one of the grassroots candidates, or are you a corporation candidate, or who's backing you the most?
Well, I am certainly one of the grassroots candidates, the Washington outsider. This is why Governor Sarah Palin has endorsed me in this race as of last. She's weighed in. She studied both of us, and she has endorsed my candidacy. I'm only one of 3 House candidates in the entire country, only one of 9 candidates total that she had in this race.
Now, in fact,
I think that
it was very interesting, too, reading about that, because I received, actually, the announcement that was sent out when she endorsed you, and it was very interesting to see the impact that she has had on previous races.
Yeah, Sarah Palin has developed a reputation of picking candidates that some view as the underdog and coming in and helping that candidate to pull out a victory.
It was a good-sized list.
It's a very good. You look at Deb Fisher in Oklahoma. Deb Fisher was in a distant 3rd place. About a month before the election, Sarah Palin came in, endorsed her, threw her weight behind her, and Deb Fisher shocked the political establishment, even the conservative political establishment, and won that U.S. Senate primary. And, we're just so pleased to have Sarah Palin's endorsement. And why this is so important, and Sarah said it herself when she offered the endorsement, we need more Washington outsiders, more people with the type of leadership experience in the private sector and at the state level, and fewer people that are used to Washington's ways. And I don't think anybody breaking down the door of Washington, D.C. more than Sarah Palin does.
Well, then I did look at the those who are endorsing which candidate, and certainly some of the ones that are endorsing you are friends of mine, J.D. Mesnard, Tom Farese, some of those, Senator Yarborough. But I also noticed on your opponent's side, it was actually surprising to me, some of those who are endorsing him. Are those endorsements that you've got sufficient, do you think, to pull you over the top?
Yeah, you know what? I think they are. I think when you look at me being endorsed by Senator Kyle, for example, which because of my leadership capacity, and being endorsed by Sarah Palin and what she represents. But ultimately, you can look at these endorsements on either side, and ultimately is what is it that the voters are looking for? What is it that they are seeking? My opponent is a good person, and he had a fairly good record while he was in Congress. And yet he spent the last 12 years lobbying in Washington, D.C. And he knows a lot of people as a result of that. And that may be a good thing in the minds of some voters, and it might not be a good thing in the minds of other voters. But now they have a choice. And what the endorsements do, I think, more than anything, is accentuate those choices.
Now let's get into some of the issues, because for many voters as well, at least those that are paying attention, we don't get too wrapped around the axle other than thinking it's a circus when tangents like Mitt Romney's tax returns and things are thrown on the table. Because when reality hits, it's these issues and the direction that we can take the country on certain issues that really is is what we should be voting for. So let's run through some of those. I know that you're very outspoken on Obamacare.
Yes.
And repealing it and getting rid of it. My question goes to, what do we put in its place? Because we certainly do have a broken system. What do we put in the place of Obamacare?
It's a very important question, and one in which Republicans, I don't think, as a group, have done a very good job of answering.
No, they have not.
I do support the complete 100% repeal of Obamacare. I think it's the worst bill in a generation, damages the Constitution, will shut down small businesses, and will not improve health care. So what would I do? I have a four-principled approach, four different principles that I think are necessary to improve the health care system. Number one, you have to restore the doctor-patient relationship. That should be the most important relationship in health care, and third-party bureaucrats, whether they be insurance company bureaucrats or government bureaucrats, should not be making health care decisions. They should be relegated to reimbursing costs. The second thing is you have to bring portability to the system. What I mean by that is you should own your own health insurance in the same way you own your auto insurance. You don't lose your auto insurance when you change jobs or lose a job. Why is it then that we lose our health insurance? It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
You should own your own health insurance, and individuals should receive the same tax benefits that employers, large or small, receive for purchasing health insurance. When you own your own insurance, and when you take it with you, and when you get the same tax benefits, there will be millions of people who will have insurance today that would have insurance today that don't have it now. The third thing that I would do is I believe that you as a healthcare consumer have a right to know. You have a right to know what the cost is for those medical procedures. Right now, we have no price transparency in the system. I would challenge you to find out what the cost of a medical procedure is at your local hospital.
Right.
But what we do know is that those costs can vary by as much as 100% from hospital to hospital. But you know what? You can't act like a consumer without knowing what the prices and the features and the benefits are. And when you can't act like a consumer, there will be no competition in the marketplace. Competitive forces will not come to bear. You, as a consumer, have a right to know, and when you know, you'll be able to get market competition back into healthcare. Those are very, very important principles. And then finally, I believe that you should have a state-based high-risk pool. Notice I said a state-based high-risk pool for individuals who cannot purchase insurance because they have a pre-existing condition or they have an acute illness or a chronic disease. This is part of the Paul Ryan plan. I think it's an important part so that those individuals who can't right now get insurance will be able to, and they will no longer be a burden upon the regular insurance pool, which will drive down costs for all of us. And the truth is there's a host of other policies that could be included with those four that will help drive down healthcare costs, keep it at a regular inflationary rate, and improve access to health care for everybody while still protecting our individual liberties and freedom. And that's what Obamacare does not do.
Seems like we're on a path, if we don't do something dramatic to change the administration, to change some of our senators out, to certainly get Senator Reid out of there, that we're on such a path towards socialism that the entire foundation of our capitalistic society is going to be changed for a long, long time if we don't do some dramatic changes. You mentioned that
Mark, the point you just made, I think, has to be reemphasized. And I make a similar point myself. We are at a crossroads, and we have to decide again as an American people if we still believe in free enterprise as the best pathway for our happiness, or do we now believe that that pathway is through government? And that government is what will help make us happy, not free enterprise.
And you know what I find very interesting is we have our country's built on largely on those who've come to our country because of our opportunity to succeed. Yet they get here, and after a generation or two, they lose that vision and they become an entitlement. All they want is entitlement instead of to get out there and make their own way. And it happens in just a couple of generations.
Right, and I have a concern for that because on the numbers out there where I was doing some research, 40% of the money that our country is spending today is either printed or borrowed, mostly from China. And so it's really vital to get back to that. And I don't know how the people who want to clean this up, and maybe you have an answer, are going to handle the feedback or the outrage that comes when government has to say no, like you would to a child, because we can't have 40% of what the country spends being just printed phony money or being borrowed, again, mostly from China. What's your take on that? How can that be addressed?
Well, you have to address that with our political leadership. And both your points, I think, go together, right? I mean, look, it is the decisions of our political leaders, their public policy decisions, that have created the entitlement mentality in this country, which have created a debt problem, which causes our federal government to print more and more money, money we simply do not have. This gets back to a sound fiscal policy of making sure that your revenues at least meet your expenses. And you can't do that anymore in this country unless you address the entitlements. And this requires political leadership, people who are willing to look the American people eyeball to eyeball and tell them the truth. And here's the truth. We cannot afford our entitlement society. And if we insist upon it as a country, then we're going to have the European-style taxation to go along with the European-style welfare state. And that is not only an American, it's the wrong course for us. So it requires leaders who are willing to say, we can't do this anymore, even if that takes political risk, even if that means coming home and not staying in Washington because you made some tough choices.
I'm glad to hear you have that backbone. That's refreshing.
Let's talk about tax rates for a little bit as well. We have a very cumbersome tax code, and I've got a fly bugging me over here, Kirk. It's kind of funny. Anyway, we've got a very cumbersome tax code and an incredible emphasis by the left to address it by just taxing those who make over $250,000 and just taxing them to death. How do we address the tax challenges that we now have without raising rates?
It's really simple. In my mind, it's really simple. The tax system in the United States needs to get a whole lot flatter. I logically would prefer, from a pure logical basis, a consumption tax. However, I think we're a long ways away from that because you can't do a consumption tax until you can repeal the income tax. Until we get to that point, I think everybody should have a little bit of skin in the game. We should have a flat tax system that's at a much lower rate. But we also have to pay attention to our business tax policy. The United States now has the most expensive business taxes in the industrialized world. Japan, on April 1st, lowered their corporate income tax rate, and they went from worst to now we, in the United States, are worst. There's a reason why that corporations, American corporations, are sitting upon record amounts of cash. And they are sitting upon record amounts of cash because of the uncertainty revolving our taxes and our tax policy. Well, if we were to reduce business taxes, say, to less than 20%, if we were to begin to phase out capital gains taxes and taxes on dividends, we would see a flood of a new investment in this country, and jobs would follow.
You know, in fact, you may remember that I also own a small law firm. And, you know, so I'm the one that puts that pen to the paycheck that you've been talking about. And yeah, taxes are a burden. People don't realize that until they're the ones that have to write those checks out. You know, I remember one time a partner that I had who had not been in business before. He became a partner because he'd been a good employee, and those two things are different things, right? And he could not get that concept down that our pay as the entrepreneur is last. Therefore, you better watch where your money's going, and taxes are a burden to us as small businessmen. And I don't know why we can't get that message across to the far left socialist leaders over there. I just don't understand it.
It's because they fundamentally believe that government is the best way to secure our happiness and our prosperity. That it's a fundamental difference in how so many of us believe. We believe that you maximize freedom, you unfetter the free market, you embrace free enterprise, and individuals will prosper. And when individuals prosper, society prospers.
I find
but they don't believe that. They believe in the groupthink, that when groups are able to carve out special advantages, they think that is the role of government. That's not the role of government, and that's not how we as human beings can achieve our maximum happiness.
I find it just a different wording. When we look at the principles upon which our republic was founded, those people came from a very fettered government. They called it a monarchy, and there were lots of rules in place and established what they established for the freedom. And so today, I guess there's always people who feel like the government, regardless of the titling we give people, although I find this SAR titling unsettling.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that the oddest thing?
Unsettling.
That is just odd. I'm sorry. That is just odd.
We didn't have that in my memory as in my childhood, though, and so we're seeing people that want to, repeat history and go back to the strong government, which is the people who founded again our country had already come from strong government, and that was the thing they wanted to get away from the most. And I wanted to go back to the lowering of taxes on corporations. I think would really incentivize corporations to come back. The jobless numbers are so high. I came across an article, it must have been in the New York Post, Washington Post, on the Sunday Washington Post. Between June and July, we actually lost 1.2 million jobs. And, I liked it. I'm kind of going all over the place, but I liked it in the day when our country was a superpower. And to me, a superpower's definition meant we could really take care of ourselves. We had our manufacturing, we had our defense up, we had a sound monetary system, which we don't see that today. Instead, we've shoved our manufacturing offshore. I think a more favorable environment would entice our manufacturing back and, again, like you said, would create jobs. So taxes are part of that. Is there any other part of the job creations through corporations that you feel would be helpful?
I think I've lost you.
Well, Kirk Adams, let me throw another question out. She was talking about the job creation, what the role taxes have on creating jobs.
There's a direct nexus to tax policy and capital investment. When I was Speaker of the House, I authored a bill that became nicknamed the Jobs Bill, and it was the largest business tax reduction in state history. That bill was passed and signed in February 2011. Would you believe it, or believe it or not, but since then we've created over 54,000 jobs in the state of Arizona. And here's a simple truism about economics. When has money to invest, we call that capital, and they want to get the best return on their investment. In fact, if they're the CEO of a company, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to get the best return on investment. And when you have tax policies that are too high, that affects your return on investment. This is why you must have low tax policy to attract capital investment. And when you get capital investment, that is the moment when somebody gets hired and other people start getting jobs. And when they have jobs, they earn income. And when they earn an income, they pay taxes. And those taxes turn into revenues that build our roads, our schools, and so forth. It all starts with somebody willing to invest. And your tax policy must be competitive for that to happen.
You know, one of the strangest taxes, Kirk Adams, is the estate tax, that we would tax somebody's estate when they die.
Yes.
What's your opinion on the estate tax?
I've actually signed a pledge to support the complete repeal of the death tax.
Well,
it's bad enough that government taxes you all throughout your life, beyond the pale that they tax you after you die. You know, this really hits small businesses especially, or small farm owners. You know, you work your whole life to build a business, you sacrifice, you sweat, and you know, at the end of your life, you've earned a little something that you want to pass along to your kids. And then the government comes in and takes it away.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. Another issue in Washington that I'm very interested in, I'd like to get your comments on, is the waste. Now, we see waste on every level of government to some degree. For example, I saw a Mike Broomhead show, or I was listening to a Mike Broomhead show where he talked about a job that was advertised for the state of Arizona that was a breastfeeding specialist for the state of Arizona, or some breastfeeding coordinator, or some blasted thing. And then I'm sitting in the motor vehicle department today, and there's advertised this government position watching over the lionfish. They actually have some people looking out for the lionfish, and it just seems like we have such a waste in government. And in the federal level, we've got this organization and that organization, this bureau and that bureau. What do you think you can do to have an impact on this ever-growing bureaucracy?
That is such an interesting question. I mean, there's no doubt that there's not one area of government, including defense, that cannot operate more efficiently and eliminate waste. No doubt about that, and there are even whole federal programs and agencies that probably don't need to be there anymore. But when it comes to the federal government budget, the scary truth is that more than 50% of everything the federal government spends is made up in 4 areas: Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and interest on the national debt. What's even scarier is that by 2022, 10 years from now, those 4 areas will consume almost 70% of everything the federal government spends. So literally, the only way you solve our debt and deficit problem is if you have the courage to reform Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And anybody running for federal office at any level, whether they're President of the United States, or whether they're running for the United States Senate or U.S. House, if they're unwilling to talk about reforming these programs, then they're not really serious about solving the problem.
Let's talk also, and again, I apologize to switch gears so quickly, but we have limited time, and I want to get your take on a very broad range of issues, so we've got a few more to run through. Immigration, hot issue. One of the arguments, of course, that is made about our immigration is not just sealing the border, but it's also that we have a large number of people that are here that brought over as youth. So President Obama gains political attention by the DREAM Act here, or his version of it. What is your opinion about immigration, including those who are already here that were brought here as children?
Very important question, especially for a state like Arizona, which shares a border with Mexico. And I can't think of a candidate in the country running for Congress who's been Speaker of the House of a border state during the immigration crisis like I have. And so I have developed some very specific opinions now on what I think works and what doesn't work. And to me, this is one of the more simple problems we have to solve. For example, border security. That's not rocket science. We know what it takes to secure the border. It's just a lack of federal will. And I say that because we've already substantially done it in the Yuma sector, in the San Diego sector, where we reduced crossings by 90%. We need to take that same methodology and do it across the entire southern border. That will functionally secure the border. At the same time, we have a legal immigration system that is completely broken and doesn't work. Did you know that in most instances, it takes less money and less time to come to the United States illegally than it does to enter legally. That's a backward system. We should be encouraging people to enter the country legally, come through the front door, and so I think simultaneously we must fix our immigration system and secure the border. Now, as it relates to the DREAM Act, I think the action that the President took was unconstitutional. The President does not have the authority to create legislation, which is effectively what he did through his executive order. I oppose the DREAM Act as originally written, and the DREAM Act that's been pushed for the last several years by Luis Gutierrez and so forth. It grants an automatic path to citizenship, and it also grants chain migration. That is the wrong approach. I think the Marco Rubio approach is a much more sensible way to deal with children who are brought here at a young age through no fault of their own. It does not grant chain migration, nor does it grant an automatic path to citizenship. And it recognizes that somebody who was brought here at the young age of 2 or 3 and has maybe never stepped foot in Mexico and is integrated in our society should have an opportunity for success here, but not with an automatic pathway to citizenship, and certainly not with the ability to bring aunts and uncles and cousins and so forth into the United States.
Kirk Adams, your feelings on values issues, marriage, Planned Parenthood, those issues?
I count these as sort of no-brainer issues.
Well, they're certainly hotly contested issues for being no-brainer ones. In fact, I can tell you that one of the things I'm doing right now is putting together a special show that'll air each week called Another Voice for Values because of how important I think it is. But it seems like with many politicians it gets swept under the rug. As why are we talking about that when there's important issues of budgets, which I agree with, but I don't think we sweep it under the rug. I think values comes out as the guiding light to solve the other problems.
The family is the fundamental unit of society, and public policy should reflect that. We passed over 40 pro-family, pro-life bills while I was Speaker of the House. The reason why this is a no-brainer issue to me is because I feel so strongly this is not something that is debatable to me. When we passed the parental consent bill and the informed consent bill here in Arizona, we were sued by Planned Parenthood. Think about this just for a moment. They sued to stop a bill that says that a minor daughter needs to have permission from her parents before she receives an abortion.
Yeah, it's inconceivable.
Planned Parenthood was opposed to that bill, yet you can't send your child to the school nurse to get a Tylenol without permission, and still your daughter could have gotten an abortion in Arizona before we passed this law. Well, Planned Parenthood sued, and they went judge shopping, and they successfully got an injunction on the bill. The Attorney General at the time was Terry Goddard. He was not adequately defending this bill, and so as Speaker of the House, I expended House funds with my own in-house counsel, Peter Gentala, to fight Planned Parenthood in court. We won. The judge saw in our favor. The bill went into effect. Shortly thereafter, Planned Parenthood announced that they were shutting down abortion services in 7 of their Arizona clinics. We defunded Planned Parenthood in Arizona. Taxpayer dollars cannot be used to fund Planned Parenthood. I am strongly pro-life and strongly pro-family.
Kirk Adams, we're running out of time. We have a few more minutes. I know Nancy's got
Nancy's
got tons of questions as well. We'll let Nancy ask them.
This is something you may or may not have any control over, but on the financial side, this derivatives issue is really of concern. We had $600 trillion in derivatives in 2008. We're now up to $1.2 quadrillion in derivatives. Each time we have these financial setbacks, people are worse and worse off. We've got people that haven't recovered from 2002, let alone 07 to 08. I mean, what if there's another mistake? I'm not real sure about how much regulation comes into play here. It's just that the derivatives market is totally out of control and very dangerous right now.
Absolutely. And that brings to mind another topic that is very closely related and was responsible for this economic collapse that we've experienced in the country. And that was the issue of the fact that we got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. which put a wall of separation between banks, traditional banking, and investment banking. And I think we can look back now and say that eliminating Glass-Steagall, which provided that wall of separation, was a mistake, because you had investment bankers on Wall Street that were playing around with your money and my money, and they had no skin in the game, nothing to lose what they were doing by bundling these mortgages, and they helped create this housing bubble, which has put us into this prolonged recession.
Well, is it on your platform or anybody's platform to try to put that protection back in place? Because, yes, that's when it all started to unravel.
I have reached the point where I would support the re-implementation of Glass-Steagall.
Okay. Your turn.
All right. Well, we only have 1 or 2 minutes left, Kirk, although I'd love to have you back another day as you get closer to the main election. The fear that many have is that we take a young buck, on fire politician and send him to Washington, and after being there for a few years, they become systematized, part of the system. How do you prevent that, Kirk Adams?
It's really simple. You have to determine as voters what motivates an individual to do what they're doing. When I was still Speaker of the House, I voluntarily opted out of receiving the state retirement for elected officials. I have pledged that if elected to Congress, that I will not accept the congressional pension either, and I will work to eliminate the congressional pension. I think we need to return to this concept of public service and not personal enrichment. If you want to predict how somebody will act in office or how holding that office will impact them personally, you have to look at what motivates them. Why are they doing what they are doing? I am not running for Congress to collect a fancy, generous congressional pension. I am running for Congress because I am convinced, beyond doubt, that my 5 will grow up in a country less prosperous and less free unless we turn things around. And I want my kids to have the same opportunities that I have had, and I don't see that happening unless we change things.
Thank you, Kirk. Hey, we are out of time. You have been a wonderful guest. I know you're very, very busy. I appreciate you carving time out to call in and visit with us for so long.
Yeah, I wish we would have had more time. We didn't finish our list.
Thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
God bless you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you again for joining me. I'm Mark Winsor with special guest Nancy Fleming. We do encourage you to stay for Nancy's show at 6:15, and stay tuned. In just 5 more minutes, we'll have the Winsor and Diller show. Appreciate you listening. Join us here in 5 minutes. God bless you.
Are you experiencing computer problems? Is your computer running slow? Bogged down with viruses and spyware? You need a reliable and knowledgeable, trustworthy computer service company. Contact Computers, Networks, and More, located in Santan Valley. Get your computer or laptop running in top condition by a certified technician.